Hi and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1229B, and today's date is March 15th, 2017, and the title of the episode is The Central Bank Deep State Started the Countdown for the Next Big Event. Let's get into the economic collapse, political and geopolitical news. Now, we know a couple weeks ago, Trump tweeted out that Obama was wiretapping his office. And of course, the corporate media went completely crazy over this. And today, we see all over the corporate media where they're saying that, oh, they have no evidence. The White House has no evidence. The GOP chair says there is no evidence. But if you listen to what they're actually saying, it's not what the corporate media is actually reporting. GOP's chair of House Intelligence Panel, Devin Nunes, well, he confirmed what he said last week, namely that his panel has still not received any evidence from the Trump organization on the wiretapping during the election campaign. Doesn't mean that there's no evidence. It means he has not received it yet. Now, we know the White House says they need a little bit more time, and they're putting the information together. And of course, McCain and all the others, they want to know what they have because they want to know where it's coming from. How did he find out? Who do we have to blackmail? Who do we have to get rid of? And we see right now that Sean Spicer is out there saying that he's extremely confident that the Justice Department will produce evidence to back up his assertion. He said Trump believes the evidence will vindicate him. And once again, I've said this in the past, he came out saying this. Now, if he produces no evidence whatsoever, he has no paper trail, absolutely nothing, he's going to be seen as a liar. So for him to come out and say something like this, they must have had some type of information. And to me, what it looks like is most likely they're trying to put this together and try to explain it to the American people. Because what we're hearing from Judge Napolitano, what we're hearing from Edward Snowden, what we're hearing from WikiLeaks is that there's certain ways to, I'll use the word wiretap the office. Now, today they don't actually go in and they tap the wires. It's already completely set up. It's already done across the country and all the devices. And we know that the NSA is collecting a lot of the information. And we know if you go outside of the country to the other organizations like the British Intelligence Office and others in other countries, they have access to the NSA database, which it is illegal for them to take that information because all they're saying is that, hey, we didn't give it to the authorities here in the United States, we gave it to the authority in a different country. And it doesn't violate the people's rights because we're not doing it here in the United States. It's like a workaround type of thing. But again, just recording and collecting in the information is a violation of our rights, even if they use it or don't use it, because they're still spying on us, because they're going to look at it when they need it. Now, according to Edward Snowden, the U.S. spy agencies can simply flip a switch to watch or listen in on anything going on in a particular room by turning on particular devices, cameras, microphones, etc. Now, we know this to be true from Vault 7. Yes, the technology is real. And we know that the NSA, the CIA, the FBI, and all the other agencies, well, they would say, ooh, it's against the law for us to actually listen and to look at this information. And this is why they have the FISA court, because it allows them to go to the FISA court, have another country look up the information and get it, and then transfer it over to the person in the United States. And this is what Obama did. Now, I'm sure the Trump administration is trying to put this together and piece it together and most likely trying to explain how this is all done and who is involved in all this. Because when it does come out, depending on how it comes out, people are going to scratch their heads and say, wait a minute, it's true that everyone is being spied on and you are collecting our information? So we will have to wait and see how this all turns out, but we can see that those in power who are on the corporate media, the deep state, the central bank, they're very nervous and they keep saying there's no evidence, trying to convince the public there's nothing, he's a liar. But we can see that something is going to come out and it's going to shock the entire world. We see Judicial Watch right now has filed a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit against the Central Intelligence Agency, the United States Department of Justice, and the Department of Treasury regarding records related to the investigation of retired United States Army Lieutenant General Michael Flynn's communication with Russian Ambassador Sergei Kiselak. Now, the National Security Agency refused to confirm or deny the existence of intelligence records about communications between Flynn and the ambassador. Now, they issued a Freedom of Information request, and the NSA has done absolutely nothing. So they filed a lawsuit against the agency, which failed to respond to their January 25th, 2017 Freedom of Information Act request. Now, in their complaint, they are asking the court to order the agency to search for all records responsive to the FOIA request and demonstrate that the agency employed reasonable search methods. Order the agencies to produce by a specific date all non-exempt records and Vaughan index of all withheld records, and instruct the agency to cease withholding all non-exempt records. Now, we'll have to wait to see how this goes. Again, these agencies, they don't want to hand over certain information. And if they did have the information and they did have the communications, they would have just handed it over. But what I suspect is that these communications show absolutely nothing, and they know it. And this is why they're just sitting on it. Now, the Department of Justice came out, and it's all over the corporate media. They're charging Russian spies over the Yahoo hack back in 2014, saying that these two FSB intelligent officers, well, they broke into Yahoo. They stole about 500 million Yahoo user accounts. This was back in 2014. And they decided to indict these two individuals. Now, what they're doing at this point is they're keeping the Russian story alive. They're pushing it out there, trying to tell you that this is exactly what they did, because they had the ability to track it down to these two individuals. Think about it for a second. Think about what happened with Vault 7, where the CIA can compile malware, compile information to make it look like it's from Russia. Do you really think a state actor is going to access Yahoo accounts, 500 million of them, take a look at the email accounts, and get caught? No, because the way they work is to show nothing. And for them to say they tracked it down to these two individuals, now remember, these individuals are not here in the United States. The indictment is meaningless because the Russian spies, well, since they're not here in the United States and they're in Russia, there's a huge problem. The U.S. does not have an extradition treaty with Russia, so Russia is not going to be handing anyone over. This whole thing is part of the propaganda because they know there's nothing they can do at this point. They want to keep the Russian propaganda alive that Russia is cyber attacking the United States, which fits into them cyber attacking the DNC, which fits into them cyber attacking the election, which fits into Trump being associated with Russia. This is how they're trying to fit it in, and they're using this right now to convince everyone that all of this is true. Why, the question? Why do they keep saying all of this stuff? Why do they want it to be true? We have to go back to what the Fed just did. They raised the Fed rate. They're setting up the economy to fail. Remember, the whole thing is based on the economy, because this is what all the countries have in common. They're flooded with debt, which cannot be sustained. And they know once they start bringing it down, they don't want the finger being pointed at the central banking system. So they need scapegoats. They need individuals they can point the finger at. One would be Trump. The other, most likely, is going to be Russia, North Korea, China. Players are always the same. Now, we see the FBI director. He's going to be testifying publicly on the Russian hacking allegations into the U.S. election system. And we can see at this point is that they're going to do this and testify in public. He's going to be doing this with Michael Rogers in front of the House Intelligence Committee investigation. And they're going to try to get information out of him, try to find out what exactly happened. And it seems like this is all a gigantic show at this point, trying to convince the American public that this is the way it really happened. And they're using this to create another show later on. Now, we have seen the U.S. have regime change around the world. We've seen it in Libya. We've seen it in Yemen. We've seen it in Iraq. They wanted to do it in Syria. We've seen it in Ukraine. And in the past, we've seen it in Iran, Cambodia, and other areas. And we can see that it costs a lot of money to have these regime changes. Sometimes it leads to war. Sometimes the United States needs to bomb certain countries. And out in Cambodia, the U.S. wants repayment for the bombing in Cambodia while the U.S. was backing a coup d'etat. Now, this is a 50-year-old loan, and the current Prime Minister, Hun Sen, is saying that he doesn't want to pay it, that the United States should just write it off because they destroyed the country. They've bombed the countryside of Cambodia. It was a carpet bombing campaign that would eventually see over 500,000 tons of explosives dropped on the Asian country, killing hundreds of thousands of civilians and leaving a legacy of unexploded ordnances all over the countryside. And he argued that the U.S. has no right to demand the repayment of its blood-stained funds. Actually, they've done more damage to the country than what Cambodia owes to the United States, with death, with the destruction of their crops, with the destruction of their land. And we can see right now, the same thing's happening in Syria. The United States, for almost 2 years, has been bombing the infrastructure of Syria, not actually going after the Islamic State, but bombing the infrastructure to have a regime change. Look in Ukraine. They are completely into debt. They had a coup d'etat which cost $5 billion. There's a civil war going on right now in Ukraine. Crimea broke off. The southeastern people don't want to have anything to do with the puppet regime inside of Ukraine. Look at Libya. The war's still going on. Look at Iraq. Look at Lebanon, Sudan, Somalia, Yemen. The government, the United States government, the deep state, they are responsible for causing destruction and havoc and refugees all over the world. For what? The piece of paper that's printed in green and black ink. That's what they're fighting for. To keep the system alive, to keep the dollar on oil. Period. And they're willing to kill hundreds of thousands of people to keep their system alive, to keep themselves wealthy and in control. Now, we see the U.S. State Department, they approved $66 million sale of mortar rounds to Singapore now. The sale was of the XM395 Accelerated Precision Mortar Initiative round, and they sold this to the government of Singapore. Now, throughout the corporate media, we see headlines stating that North Korea, well, they've been put into combat mode, and they're ready to invade, or they're ready to do something. Well, the reason why North Korea is in combat mode is because down in South Korea, the U.S., South Korea, and other forces are having military drills. Remember, they're practicing to remove Kim Jong-un. Now, if you saw a massive drill of 100,000 soldiers right off the coast, right next to your country, and if you saw this going on, you would put your armed forces in combat mode because you don't know what they're going to do. And we can see that they use this headline to show that North Korea is ready to do something, which is not true. It's actually the opposite. Now, out in Ukraine, we see Poroshenko. Well, he just stopped all trade with the southeastern people. And it looks like at this point that since they stopped trade with those individuals, it looks like Poroshenko is getting prepared to really go all out in this area. Remember, we had Graham, we had McCain visit Kiev. They said this is the year of the offensive. We understand they're pushing a war. Right now, Kiev has just placed additional sanctions on Russia. I don't really think Russia really cares, but they're doing all of this to provoke and push something big. And we can see this is not just happening in Kiev, it's happening in many different areas. Now, yesterday we reported, or the day before we reported, that Russia is bringing in troops into Egypt. Now, Russia is out there, and they're saying this is completely untrue. We have not brought in special forces into Egypt. This is just not being done. And they're responding because the U.S. is claiming that this was the case. And there was an Egyptian official claiming that 22 Russian troops were at a Western airbase, apparently with an eye on aiding Libyan National Army. And Russia's saying, no, this is not true whatsoever. Now, the question we have to ask is, why was this being put out there? Well, it looks like the U.S. might be preparing to go into Libya, because we can see that things are completely getting out of hand in Libya. And we also see that the White House, they have given the Pentagon commanders additional authority in selecting Yemen operations in order to achieve a strategic effect. And what they're saying is they won't need the president's approval for each strike. Now, this seems a little odd to me because what Trump has said and what he's doing are completely two different things. It seems like he's getting more and more involved in these wars in the Middle East, following up on what Obama was doing, what the deep state was doing. And we can see that we have troops inside of Syria, of course, illegally, and we have Russian troops that are also in Syria. They're there at the same time in the same place for the first time. Now, nothing has happened at this point, but this is very interesting where they're all in the Raqqa-Manbij area. Now, President Trump says the purpose of the escalation is to defeat the Islamic State in Raqqa. However, the Syrian army, with its allies Russia and Iran, are already close to defeating the Islamic State in Syria. So why must the U.S. military be sent in when the Syrian army, the Russian forces, and Iran are already winning? They're already pushing the Islamic State back. I mean, what is the plan here? Do they wish to occupy the eastern Syria area? Is this what they want to do? They want to split up Syria? Are they still going to be going after Assad? Because what's really the agenda here? Because the Islamic State is completely done with right now. Now, if Trump is planning on handing eastern Syria over to the Kurds, well, this is completely illegal. What gives the United States the rights to do this inside of Syria? They have no rights to do this. And if they're deciding to go after Assad, well, we see we're on the same exact agenda. We're on the same exact goal. And this whole mission, whatever it is, it's not going to succeed. And if he's doing this by listening to certain individuals in the deep state, the neocons trying to push him into this area, he's going to run into a situation where the whole thing is going to be a complete mess. And I think most likely this is what they're trying to have happen, where they completely have this whole entire area completely blow up. I don't mean physically blow up with a bomb, but completely blow up into a complete mess. And it looks like they're using this to either split Syria or go after Assad at this point. And they're telling him and giving him information where they're pushing him into this quagmire where he'll never be able to get out of. And we need someone in the inside to say, hey, listen, the Islamic State is supported by the United States. I mean, maybe you should go talk to Tulsi Gabbard, talk to Rand Paul, who have these bills out there. We're supporting, we're funding Al-Qaeda, Al-Sham, Al-Nusra, the Islamic State. The mission was to get to Assad. There are no Muslim terrorists running around like crazy. That's all propaganda. And we can see at this point that the deep state still has their hold. They're still forcing him or pushing him, or maybe he's moving over to that side. But again, his actions will let us know where we are headed. And when we look at what's happening right now, we can see the countdown has begun. Troops are mounting up in this area. Provocations are occurring with North Korea. We see that they've arrested 2 FSB spies for the hacking of Yahoo. We see the Fed has raised the interest rates once again. They're going to be doing it again and again during this year. The whole thing is being set up. The countdown has started, and they're preparing for this big event. Remember, the deep state, the central bankers, they still control what is going on. They still want to meet their goal. Does it mean their plan is going to work? Well, we've seen in the past, their plans don't always work out. I mean, look, did they really expect to be in Syria for 6 years? No, they didn't. And they've come up with plan after plan. They did the sarin gas plan. They did the Islamic State plan. They tried the chemical weapons plan of blaming it on Assad, bringing it to the UN. It all didn't work, siding with the Kurds. Everything completely fell apart. But we could see at this point, they're still trying to reach their goal. And they feel that the time now is ticking down. They've already made the decision to collapse the economy. They can't take it any further because it will collapse on its own and they will be blamed. So it's either do or die at this point. And it looks like they have their hooks maybe into Trump, forcing him to go in a certain direction and push the agenda of what they want. And as we can see, as we move throughout this year, as we move into the spring, into the summer, everything is just going to heat up. And everything is going to start to fall apart very, very rapidly. And we can see at this point that they're not going to shy away from blaming Russia, from blaming North Korea, from blaming China on anything that happens. Because, again, with the setup of Russia is hacking. Russia has spies hacking into Yahoo. They are completely setting this up because they know when the economy comes down, it's not going to be enough just to blame it on Trump, because it's going to be very difficult to blame all of it on Trump. They're going to need something else to show why the rest of the economy has been brought down, why the banks need to be closed, why the bail-in documents need to be used, why the Fed needs to start up QE once again. Right now, we are in the biggest illusion that we've ever seen, and they need a way out of what they created. And they're coming up with this plan right now, which is already set and done, where they're going to push their agenda forward and try to get out of this mess, and to make sure that they are not blamed for any of this, because in their minds, they want this system completely reset. They want control still of it. They don't want to give up control. We see what happens when leaders and powerful individuals are being forced out. They don't want to leave. The central bank, well, they've had power for quite a while. They don't want to leave ever. So they're orchestrating everything that we're seeing right now. They have it planned. They can bring the economy up. They can make it look like it's doing well. They control all of it. They control the money supply. They control everything. And right now, from everything that we're looking at, it's a go. They're prepared and ready to bring it all down. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.